Well, joining me on the broadcast right now is Maxim Yali. He's joining us from Kyiv. He's a political expert in international relations. He's a professor also at the Department of International Relations at the National Aviation University of Kyiv. Good afternoon, Mr. Yali. Thank you for speaking to us. Mr. Yali, you just heard your president over there. He spoke significantly about the security guarantors and how he sees that perhaps as a way forward in talks with Russia. Now, France has already responded, so has China. China, of course, doesn't want to be involved with this. But do you think perhaps that that's the way forward?
Well, you mean as for China or negotiations in general?
I mean negotiations in general, that you are given security guarantees by at least some powerful European countries perhaps, and thereafter there can be some sort of agreement between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, there are few points I need to dwell upon. Firstly, as for guarantees, Germany, Italy, Britain, Turkey agreed already to give such guarantees. But the problem is that, for example, Great Britain is not ready to give such guarantees as NATO states, Article 5. Yes, so it means if Russia attacks, invades us once again, they will not join the war. So, and of course, we need a guarantee from a nuclear power state, definitely, because we are waging war with a second nuclear power state, Russia. So, of course, and we need such guarantees from the United States, most important because it's number one, state's number one superpower, nuclear superpower. And unfortunately, so far, the United States are not ready. We started discussions. So from my point of view, it will take a lot of time, and I have serious doubts that the United States, at least now, is ready to give such guarantees to Ukraine. The same as you mentioned, China, France, and other states. They are afraid even to give us necessary equipment, weapons, anti-air systems to protect our air. What to tell about guarantees against nuclear state such as Russia. So from my point of view, it's a long talk. As for the negotiations in Turkey, I'm sure also in nearest future, I mean next couple of weeks, I'm not expecting any significant results. Actually, the representative of Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs just yesterday said the same. Because now, you know, the most important, I want to believe, the final battle is going to take place in Donbass. You know that Russians withdrew their troops from Kyiv region and from the north of Ukraine. And now they are preparing again new huge attack on Donbass. And of course, one of the most important issues is Mariupol. We still, our warriors still fighting, no matter that they are surrounded from all sides for more than a month already. So from my point of view, Russia is not ready to sign a truce, not talking about peace treatment, before they achieve their goals. And the goal is to capture Donetsk and Lugansk region completely, and to safeguard the corridor, ground corridor to Crimea. That's their main goal so far.
All right. As you're pointing out, of course, they are now also concentrating the fighting towards that region because they've withdrawn from other parts of Ukraine. Let me also bring in Yevgenia Kravchuk. She's a Ukrainian MP. She now joins us live. Ms. Kravchuk, thank you very much for speaking to us on Republic TV. First of all, I'd like to ask you that yesterday the Ukrainian president, in his interview to our editor-in-chief, made one thing very clear, that he'd like to have one-on-one talks with President Putin, and he feels that that's the way forward to get out of this. Now, do you see that perhaps this, one-on-one talks between the two presidents could be the way out, and do you think that Russia would be willing to do that?
Well, Russia to be really willing to have some sort of peace negotiation, there is a very important point. We need to have a victory on the battlefield. That's why we've been asking the world to give us more weapons, because our army is capable to use them, and we've already proven that. More than 40 days would not have been standing and not given, the possibility of Russia to seize capital or other cities they wanted, as Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Odessa. Actually, their so-called withdrawal from northern Ukraine was nothing else but fleeing, because they couldn't hold, longer and to go further to have Kyiv. So I think the real peace negotiations, when Russia will not be in their propaganda world they created for themselves, is when Ukrainian army will basically kick out Russia from the territories they seized after February 24th. And that was actually our President Volodymyr Zelensky telling in this exclusive interview, that program minimum for us is to free these territories that Russia captured and occupied since February 24. And of course, Crimea and part of Donbass that was occupied in 2014, is much longer and more complicated process that probably does need these diplomatic negotiations.
Right. Also, if I could come back to you on this one. Earlier on, you were talking to, this question, of course, is for Mr. Yali. Mr. Yali, you were saying that you don't really think that security guarantees will take you much further. Now, is Ukraine actually cinched by the fact that, NATO, even though they have helped you with weapons, aren't really willing to join that fight? So security guarantees, in a sense, need to be more substantial, because if they just mean that they'll give you weapons, if you're attacked by another power, that doesn't really cut any ice. So do you think perhaps there is some amount, from what I could understand of what you were saying, there is some amount of skepticism over that as well?
Well, of course, we have this skepticism because, unfortunately, for the first month, NATO didn't support us with necessary weapons. Moreover, we backed them and President Zelensky and all the people of Ukraine to close the sky, because that's the biggest problem, because Russians keep bombarding civilians, not only military infrastructure, as they say, but thousands of civilians were killed just because of bombs. My sister from Mariupol told me this nightmare. It's the biggest nightmare when they are bombing from the air and nobody can escape the death. And that's the problem. Of course, we keep skepticism. And from my point of view, and political analysts agree that we can negotiate in this sphere. I mean, not joining NATO, because unfortunately they are not waiting for us, and it's a matter of a long period of time, at least 10 years. So they made such conditions to Ukraine last year on summit of NATO in summer, that they can, for example, besides, very difficult conditions from my point of view. Another, there are such states as Hungary, for example, which is blocking cooperation between Ukraine and NATO for several years already. And Mr. Orban again won the elections. So there are some pro-Russian governments in NATO that will not let Ukraine to join NATO, even if we make all the necessary reforms, conquer corruption. It is also now their condition, though it's not for military alliance. Turkey, Greece had also corruption problems, but they joined NATO many years ago, many decades ago. It was not an obstacle. So still we should be realistic and understand that NATO is a very long perspective in any way. Besides, decisions are made there by consensus. And it's a very big problem when there are such states as Hungary, as I mentioned, and some other. For example, even Germany and France, they blocked in 2008 in Bucharest summit, yes, when we were applying for the NATO to receive the plan. And they blocked it. And Mrs. Merkel, for example, just recently, a few days ago, she said, no, I'm not sorry that I didn't agree Ukraine to join, to give the plan at that time.
Right.
It's okay. So we should realize that we need guarantees, and even some NATO member states, like Baltic states, Poland, are doubting whether US will give
So Mr. Yali, essentially you are taking, promises with a pinch of salt because you have history to do so. If I could come to Ms. Kravchuk right now. Ms. Kravchuk, your president, Mr. Zelensky, of course, spoke from a position of strength yesterday when he was interviewed by our editor-in-chief, Arnab Goswami. He spoke of the fact that we are only defending what is ours. How has the response been to that interview?
When I was asked in the Capitol Hill, because I was last week in Washington having meetings with our counterparts in Congress, and also we had meetings in DOD, in Pentagon, we were told that there is no difference right now between the offensive and defensive weapons. Why? Because we are defending our territory. We're not going to the territory of Russia. We're just, taking what is ours. And that's why President Zelensky said that we will never give up, because there is no other choice for us than to continue fighting. And right now, the support of Ukrainian army is around 99% of all the people. So we do believe in our victory. And returning to your previous question about the guarantees and why there is this skepticism, I'll tell you why. Because we had Budapest Memorandum in 1994, and when we gave up our nuclear power, and the countries who signed this Budapest Memorandum, actually Russia as well, Russia signed the memorandum as well, saying that it will protect the integrity and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And years later, Russia invaded Ukraine. And other countries who did sign the Budapest Memorandum actually, didn't do anything except of sending us weapons, which is also good, because that's why we're standing for more than 40 days. And when you see and you read clearly the Article 5, for example, in the NATO agreement, it says that the operation could start as long as 60 days. Well, imagine if, Russia invades Lithuania or Estonia. I mean, these are very, very, very small countries. They will be able to hold these 60 days. So that's why some of the countries who are closer to the border actually are adopting, this Article 5, and that is the result of this very mild policy of NATO, trying to, not to anger the aggressor, not to do anything to provoke, as they said. But it was a mistake in 2014 when the world did nothing, when Russia annexed Crimea, saying that, do not provoke the war. But now you have 8 years later, this full-fledged war with thousands of killed civilians, killed kids. I mean, atrocities that the world hadn't seen probably since the Second World War. And that was a result of NATO countries sort of, closing their eyes. That's why Zelensky said that, the countries of the West need at least 10% of courage of Ukraine to stand for values, to stand for democracy, and to stand for this security in architecture. Because if we do not stop Putin right now, there would be other invasions in other countries. There'd be other dictators who will think, well, if the world didn't stop Putin, I can do whatever in my part of the world.
So, Ms. Kravchuk, what you're essentially saying is that it is the silence of the international community and the lack of a robust response that actually led to what we are seeing today. Both of you, thank you very much for speaking to us on Republic TV and for taking out the time.